On this episode, we discuss some of the ups and downs of raising a kid in a city that's not necessarily a kid-friendly place.
So if you're someone who likes kids, or even if you don't, you'll probably get some good info on this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who followed a friend to Thailand in 2001, and then when he went home, I just kind of didn't.
And I'm Ed Canuck, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 17 and a half years ago. Before we start, a quick shout-out to one of our new patrons, Chris Morgan, who supports us at the show shout-out level. Stick around after we're done talking about the reality of having kids in Bangkok to hear some juicy gossip about Chris. Of course, one of the cool things our patrons get is a weekly, unscripted, uncensored bonus episode where we talk about all kinds of stuff, usually related to current events, something going on in our lives or something happening in Thailand. On this week's bonus show, which we just finished recording a few minutes ago, we chatted about how I recently played a tour guide and chaperone, I guess, to a group of 4 21-year-old American college guys who had never been to Thailand before, and the various shenanigans we got up to as I showed them around Bangkok.
So you had to be responsible for one night, eh?
Yeah, that's right. I got to be the responsible one.
Right on. Well, so before we jump into things, I also want to give a quick shout out to the boys at This Strange Life podcast. I was a guest on their show that aired a few weeks back, which was a lot of fun. The podcast talks about some of the weird and unusual aspects of life, from ghosts to cryptocurrency, although we mostly just rambled about life in Bangkok for an hour or so, while many beers were downed. But it was a lot of fun to record, so check it out if you're looking for something new over at soundcloud.com/this_strange_life, and I'll put a link onto our on the blog page as well.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. So over the past few years, we've gotten a number of requests to do a show about raising a family in Bangkok. So for this episode, we thought we'd dip our toe into those deep and complicated waters and talk about my particular experiences with having a toddler in this insane, fascinating city. And I know, Ed, you have a few questions for me, and there are some interesting observations that you have when you're a parent here that I've had over the years. I thought we'd talk about that tonight, just sort of like what it's like having a little kid to take care of and suddenly having all this responsibility, and what do you do and where do you go and how do you do it, and what kind of questions and worries consume you as a parent.
Sure. Well, just to be clear, I think I will avoid the general questions like, what's it like to change a diaper?
Yeah.
I'll try to. So this is all about what's it like to raise a kid as an expat in Bangkok.
Yeah, and you know, sort of a quick disclaimer, like my kid is 3.5 years old, almost 3.5 years old, so I have no experience with teenagers or older kids or anything like that, so I don't know that yet. But the basics for me is that I grew up absolutely adamant that I was never going to have kids. Never.
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, and I was very close to getting a vasectomy when I was about 22 years old.
Really? Whoa.
Yeah. So I went from that to not only having a kid, but having a kid in a culture and country that I am still trying to figure out. So that is very weird.
No doubt.
So Ed, let's kick things off. I know you had a couple of questions you wanted to ask me. So what is one question you have about having a kid in Bangkok?
Well, I know you have wrestled with this kind of issue, but I am married, although I don't have kids, but it's still a possibility. And I, in general, I just kind of worry about school. I worry about education, what kind of education my kid would get, whether it would be in Thai, whether it would be in English, the quality of it compared to what you'd get in the U.S. or Canada, maybe cost issues. I mean, without getting too personal, can you kind of frame the issue or talk about how you think about it?
Yeah, man, that is a series of shows, and I've rambled on about that at bits and bobs here and there over the past year or so. So I won't get into it too much, but it is a major part of being a parent here, because I have known at least half a dozen friends who have been here years. And when they have a kid, they go back home because they just cannot afford an international school here. And if, for those of you that don't know, I mean, the really good, more expensive international schools in Bangkok, you're looking at 750,000, 800,000 baht a year, starting with grade 1.
Wow.
You know, that's $20,000 or so.
Just to show you how naive I am, do you think it's necessary to pay that in order to get a good education?
That's a great question, and I don't know. I know that my kid is not going to get that education because there's no way in hell that we're even close to being able to afford something like that.
Well, maybe not right now. You don't know where you're going to be in 5 years, sir.
Right. Maybe we'll get another 50,000 patrons by the end of this month. Who knows? It's something that I think about, and it's kept me up at nights. And the bottom line is that my kid is going to get the best education that I can afford, not the best education that money can afford, which is a big difference.
Well, that's really always true. I'm just curious how much, if I guess the real question is, how much of a gap is there between those like international schools and maybe the school you can't afford? Or even that's not even the right question. The right question is how the school that you can afford, how do you think that would compare to, let's say, a public school in the States or Canada?
Yeah, well, it's funny. It depends who you talk to. And I think a lot of foreigners here, when they have a kid, they're in the mindset that we have to send our kids to an international school. There's no other option. That's all there is to it. And you either go broke or bankrupt or you move away. But I mean, I've got plenty of Thai friends who went to just a regular Thai school. My wife went to a regular Thai public school, and all of these people have grown up to be smart, successful, multilingual, cultured, well-traveled, interesting people.
Right,
so
right.
That's obviously not the end all be all of it. It's not like, oh, they can't go in international school, it's game over. Like, you might as well just give up.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. I mean, most of my students that I have at the university level, not all of them, but most of them went to Thai high schools. I mean, some of them went to good Thai high schools, but only about less than 20% of my students actually were in international schools, and they're able to study in English at the university level, even though they're coming out of Thai public schools.
Right. And I think the bottom line is that I've talked to a lot of people, and they say, look, like a kid with a good, healthy home environment where the parents are involved in his learning, not necessarily his schooling, but his learning, right? Like taking field trips, weekend trips, family trips, things like that. Those are all incredibly educational opportunities. A kid that comes from an environment like that and has supportive friends and family and whatever, like they're going to succeed no matter where they are.
No, I agree with that.
Very, very roughly. Of course, there's loopholes for every situation, but I think that's the general gist that I get from talking to a lot of parents. So there are a lot of choices between an international school and like the regular school down the street.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Like, there's got to be some kind of middle option.
Yeah, there's bilingual schools, and there's Thai schools, there's private schools, there's a lot of schools in Thailand that mix their curriculum with elements of Western curriculums from other schools like Cambridge or Harvard or something like that. Like, they pull a little bit from them and mix it in with their own. So, yeah, I don't want to talk about it too much, but the bottom line is there are options, but it's just it's a real headache and a real big issue for parents here. Any parent in Thailand is going to struggle with this.
I mean, so would you say then that education is probably issue number one, or obstacle or problem number one?
Yeah, for me, yeah, and for a lot of people I know, it's definitely at least in the top three.
Well, it's good to know. It's good to know. I mean, any of our listeners who are planning on raising a family here, they should start researching and planning and work in this problem. Because I mostly went to public schools in the States, and I think my parents didn't have to do too much thinking about it.
Yeah, same.
Like in the States, you go to the public school in your neighborhood. Like you're not even allowed to go to another one in a different neighborhood, so it's like fixed.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and moving back to Canada is not really an option for us because everyone says, "Oh, you move back to Canada, education is free." Well, okay, it kind of is, and it's not really free. It's good education, but your taxes pay for it. And okay, I'm not paying a ton of money for my kid to go to school. Instead, I'm paying a ton of money for rent,
right? Sure,
and heat in the winter, and food because it's so bloody expensive in Canada. So all these things even out. Anyway, I think the bottom line is that it is a major part of being a parent here, and it's something that is a big part of deciding not only where you live in Bangkok, but if you live in Bangkok or Thailand.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's move on from education. So the other thing that immediately popped in my head, or immediately pops into my head when I think about having a family here, is I wonder, like, who would my kids' friends be? Like, who would his peers be? Because, like, you know, I grew up in the suburbs, which meant that I ran around with kids like in my neighborhood, you know, and like we had a crew. But like city living, part of the problem is not just that we're in Thailand, it's the fact that we're in the middle of a gigantic city.
Yeah, I grew up in a little town.
Right. I grew up in a suburb, but in like a town, at least you know your neighbors, you know people around you.
Right. Like I'd get up in the morning on summer holidays anyway. I'd get up in the morning and I'd have my bowl of Fruit Loops and I'd be out the door until the sun went down on my bike with my friends. And,
right, exactly.
You know, my mom knew that I was probably safe. And even when the school was in, starting in grade 5, I was walking to school by myself, which probably took about 25 minutes, the neighborhood school.
Sure.
But I would meet my friends at the bus stop and we would walk. And then I don't know, like he's only 3.5, so he doesn't really have a crew yet. although a bunch of 3.5-year-olds run around like punks. Would be pretty funny.
You think he doesn't have a crew. You don't know what he's getting up to when he's not with you.
Yeah, that's right, man. Maybe he's got his own baby crew. But he does have friends, and it's mostly friends of my kids of my friends who are his default friends, you know. But that's something I also think about. Like when he just started kindergarten, and he just went to like sort of a bilingual kindergarten that's close to our house, but it's mostly Thai kids. In fact, I think it's almost all Thai kids except one other Luk Krung kid, one other half Thai kid.
Interesting.
And I was worrying about that, but I don't know if I should be worried about it. Like, is he going to experience any, maybe racism is not the right word, but is he going to look around one day in his school and go, huh, I'm different? And my kid looks like a foreigner. He doesn't look Thai.
Well, I'm sure he has to do that at some point. I mean, he's going to have to go through that.
Yeah, and what's that going to be? I mean, maybe I'm just overthinking it, but I told this to a friend of mine, and he said, yeah, it might happen, but I'll tell you what, if you're going to be different in Bangkok, being a Luk Krung kid is probably a pretty good place to be different in, because
I would agree.
You know, they're sort of seen as like extra cute, or, you know, these third culture kids that get the benefits of their foreign father and the Thai mother and sort of mix the two cultures together, so...
No doubt. Yeah. I'm sure he'll be popular with the ladies. Put it that way.
Well, one can hope. So yeah, it's something I've thought about, and I wrote a blog post about this a few months back on gregtodiffer.com about my childhood compared to my son's childhood and how they're going to be so different, man. Like I said,
yeah, that seems unavoidable based on the fact that you were in a small town in Canada.
Right, but like when I was a kid growing up, we would go to the park, we would go to the movie theater, we would go for walks, you know, we would have barbecues outside. Like Bangkok's not an outdoor city, and we've talked about this before on the show too, but most families just go to the mall.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, so
it's a different scene. I mean, there's got to be, you know, I think having seen my sisters raise kids, I think there obviously is a culture. There's a subculture of parents with kids, and you tend to find other parents with kids too.
Yeah,
you know, so you will kind of build. I think you'll build your own network.
Well, that's another thing about having kids too. Is it like now I've got a kid? It's like, oh, geez, now I got to make whole new friends. Like I'm happy with the group of friends I have, man. Like it's hard work making friends.
It is.
You know, you've got to filter out all the weirdos and find people you're compatible with and stuff like that, and then you got to make an effort to hang out. Those are young man's opportunities, man. Like I'm too old for that now. But now I've got a kid. Funny. I'm like, shit, I need more friends with kids. So now now the burden's on me. I've got to go out and make new friends.
You know, one of the unintended side effects of this show might be to convince some of our listeners to not have kids.
Yeah, maybe. Let me ask you this: do you think Bangkok is a good city to raise kids in?
You know, it's a tough question. The bottom line is, I think it's different from our upbringing. So, you know, like I said, I was in the suburbs, and I could walk to school, and I ran around outside all day. So, I mean, just because it's going to be different from what we had, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Like, there's still tons of cool stuff. I mean, you and I stayed here because we love the city, and I know obviously we came here when we were older, but. I don't know. I think it's just about adjusting and adapting and you know and finding out how to do it. But I think there's so much cool stuff in the city that I think it could be a good place to raise kids.
Yeah, and I remember I asked this on Twitter one time, and I think it was an almost exact 50-50 split. Half the people replied No, absolutely not. This is a terrible city to raise kids in. Either move to the countryside, go to Chiang Mai, or go back home. And the other half of the people were like, yeah, I grew up here and I loved it. It was great. So I think it just really depends on your attitude. And I think I've got a fairly positive attitude, and I think that'll show through with my son, hopefully, anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Well, let me ask you this. This is another thing that I've often wondered about. So obviously your son is bilingual, and so I think you told me before that in general your wife speaks to him in Thai and you speak to him in English. Is that right?
In general, yeah. There's a little bit of overlap there, like a Venn diagram of Thai and English,
which is your wife's English. It's not your Thai, right?
Hey, give me some credit here, dude. I'm pretty good with Thai. My wife's English, my wife's English is much better than my Thai, put it that way. But it's just getting to the point now where he's figuring out, like, oh, mommy can use any words. Daddy's an idiot, and he can only use these words and some of these words. But I'll tell you what, I was really proud just last week. He translated something for the first time. And he was saying something happened with his tooth, like his tooth hurt or some gum was stuck on his tooth or something. And he was saying it in Thai. And I didn't really get what he was saying. And he said it to me about 3 or 4 times. And I said, I don't understand. And you could see him thinking. You could see the little hamster in his brain going around the wheel. And he said, the gum is stuck on my tooth. You know?
Oh, excellent.
And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, he's starting to get the connection that there's 2 distinct languages here. You know?
Right. Very cool. Well, so that the kind of bilingual thing, I kind of understood. But what does that mean about his education? Like, so when he goes to school, do you have to pick? Like, he's going to be mostly taught in Thai or English, or are there schools that like split it 50-50, or how do you figure out what his education is going to be in?
Well, there probably is, but I mean, I don't know yet because we haven't really figured out what his educational road will be as he gets into grade 1 and then grade 6 and 8 in high school and things like that. So I imagine that his Thai will eventually end up being the dominant language, but then it becomes sort of my responsibility to make sure his English is also very strong. So I need to encourage speaking and reading and writing as much as I can and try to make it fun, you know. So
right.
I think especially in the next year or so here when he starts kindergarten, his English or his Thai proficiency will like shoot right up. So I've got to work hard to sort of keep his English proficiency at least sort of trailing closely behind.
Well, all I can say is, I've had hundreds, if not thousands, of students who are Thai with like 2 Thai parents, and they start studying English early. So they have had a lot of English, and I wouldn't say that their English is perfect, but they're very functional, like in an academic setting. So they're studying at the university level. I mean, they're reading Shakespeare, they're reading American history, they're reading politics, and their English is not perfect, but they're very capable of studying at the university level, and that's with no white guy at home speaking English to them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, dude, I can't even read Shakespeare.
Well, it's like I think most Thai parents are smart and they start their kids in English classes like very young.
Right.
But he watches like a lot of his TV shows and things are in English, or is he watching both Thai and English TV shows?
Both. Yeah, I come out in the morning and he's watching some Thai cartoons with grandma or something, and then in the evening he likes watching a lot of the animated Pixar movies and things like that that are all in English. So yeah, I think he can pretty comfortably go back and forth between them, but I can say confidently that he's already the best English speaker in his school. So,
well, I understand your point about like Thai maybe becoming his primary language if he's studying at a Thai school, but just from my experience, seeing how good the English is in these Thai kids who have 2 Thai parents, it's like I'm sure his English will be like university level. I can't imagine how it would not be.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, another thing that keeps me up at night, and we talked about this in last week's or the week before, I can't remember, the bonus episode where I talked about how even though Bangkok is my home, I still never feel really safe here.
Oh, right. I guess that is a factor.
Yeah,
right?
Like my friend who was walking on the sidewalk and a security gate fell on him and killed him. People falling in grates and in drains and tripping on the sidewalk all the time.
That's exactly right. We, it's the weird irony of Bangkok is that there's seems to be less violent crime. Like in terms of violent crime, I feel safer here than in Cleveland, in my hometown, Cleveland, Ohio.
Right.
But in terms of like random accidents, motorbike accidents,
Totally.
construction accidents, I feel like this is less safe
Totally.
for sure than the States.
Totally. So now, like every week, every Saturday and Sunday morning, we wake up and we get dressed, and I take him outside. I get my coffee, and he gets a little sort of like cup of milk foam, and we sit down and have our father-son coffee bonding moment. But like just walking to the neighborhood coffee store, I'm looking behind us, I'm looking in front of us. I'm like, when is a motorcycle going to come flying out of some side soy, and when is some guy pushing a bug cart going to come rambling down the sidewalk? Like, is the awning we're walking underneath, is that going to fall on us? It's kind of like all these things that like, oh, is he going to see a cat and take like 3 steps in the wrong direction and get smoked with a bicycle, or it's just like it's a constant worry, and so you've got to have kind of a spider sense when you're out anywhere with a little kid.
It's funny. Everything you're saying is very specific to Bangkok, so it seems warranted and rational. But it actually triggered a memory I had of a buddy of mine in the States, who when his son was young, and I remember him talking the same way in the States. Like I remember specifically him talking about like him panicking when his son was playing at the playland at McDonald's.
Really?
He was trying to like eat lunch, like keeping one eye on his kid, and his kid is like swinging on some rings or something like that and going down slides, and he was like talking about how, what if he slips and cracks his head, and so maybe this is what you're going through is more of a parent thing. I'm not saying you're wrong. Everything you say about the dangers of Bangkok is true.
Yeah, fair enough. And of course, I've never raised a kid in a Western country, so I have no frame of reference. But I would say a kid falling and cracking his head off of a playground could happen anywhere. A kid falling and cracking his head off a playground because it's been sitting in the sun for 12 years and was built by some drunken Somchai, is probably not going to happen in Western countries where construction standards have to meet certain minimum requirements that you might not get all the time.
True.
Here.
True.
So.
Yeah, I think here you need to pay attention to different things that you wouldn't have to worry about so much in the States or in Canada. You got to pay attention to that. Well, like last question. I don't know if we got time for one more question. And this may be a little bit deep, but we can just maybe open up this issue and talk more about it later. So what do you think about your son, like the way he's going to think about himself in terms of like his national identity? Like, do you think he'll think about himself as Thai, as Thai Canadian? Like, is there like a Thai Canadian thing? Is that even a thing? Are there like a lot of Thai Canadians?
That's interesting, and I've only recently started to think about that. I mean, there's a Thai Canadian Chamber of Commerce. There's the Thai Canadian Gymnastics Club, which I think we're going to start putting him in because
oh really? Wow,
little kid loves rolling around and doing somersaults and flipping off the bed and hurting himself. So cool. We figure why not channel it to sort of something more constructive and official. But that's something that I've started to think about because, for instance, we don't celebrate Christmas here. My wife and I, me personally in Thailand, sort of Christmas is like yeah for the tourists. I'm not with my family. It doesn't really mean anything to me. So I don't buy presents. I don't put up a tree. I don't put up lights or anything like that. But now with my son, that's something I'm going to have to start doing. And for 2 reasons. One, because it's fun. Celebrating Christmas with kids is fun. And it's true what they say. When you have a kid, you start seeing things through their eyes and they become fun again. That's totally true.
Oh, interesting.
The second reason is because that's part of Canadian culture. Christmas is the biggest holiday of the year. So I need to start doing things like that. Christmas, Halloween.
In a way, that's those are kind of like rituals that are part of the Canadian identity,
right? And I've got to introduce them to the Canadian flag. Oh, this thing that you see all the time, the red, white, and blue one, that's Thailand, and this is Canada. This is where I'm from. So I've got to give him a map and tell him about this is where Daddy's from, and all of these things that are going to happen later. I need to keep on those, and I can't afford to go a trip home every year. So that's something that I'm going to have to work from this end. And that's another thing that you have to worry about when having a kid is that, when I was single, I could just zip home and see my mom for Christmas or something like that and hang out with my family.
Sure.
But now I've got a kid, so it's me, my wife, and my son. That's 3 airplane tickets. Not only that, sure. I can't just hop on a random city bus when I get off the airport. I need to rent a car. I need to have a child seat, which is like $50 a day to rent from the car rental company. So all these things make traveling anywhere really expensive and not so easy. So.
Well, it's probably not. It's not that important for him to go to Canada as a kid. But you're right. At some point, you got to take him there.
Exactly, and at some point, he's got to start to learn about that, and hopefully, he's going to have some innate interest in it. Like, I can't force him to be Canadian. I can't force him to like Canada, and I can't force him to learn about it. So I've got to sort of make that. I've got to make him interested in learning about himself, or at least the dad side of him. So as to how to do that, I have no clue, man. I haven't figured that out yet. It's a lot of it is a big question mark, and I think one of the realizations is as you get older, when you get to sort of working and into real life, is that you realize no one knows what they're doing, and it's the same when you're a parent. You realize that no one has any answers. We're just making it up as you go along and just hoping for the best. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. So at the same time that I'm still learning about living in Bangkok, I've also got to kind of help navigate him through learning in Bangkok. Although for him, this is going to be his native land, essentially.
Right. This is going to be normal. This is going to be completely normal for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in a way that to me, like the whole vibe I'm getting is that the fact that you see this as a challenge, it just makes you more engaged. Like, it's like I think most. I don't know. I feel like most dads in the States, they're not thinking this much about being a dad, and like I think because you see these various issues that you got to make sure you cover, it seems to makes you engaged. Like you really seem to be worried a lot about being a good dad, which that's going to make you a good dad. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, that's pretty heartwarming. Yeah, thanks, man. I never thought of it that way, but I guess if I was completely comfortable with my life and my surroundings and the things around me, it would be easy for me to go, and now you do the thing.
Right, you don't have to do anything. You know, like here now, you have to be more hands-on.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. So I think hopefully I'm going to learn a lot out of it, and hopefully he will too. And so we'll see how it goes.
Well, I'm just going to learn from all your mistakes, and then then I'll have my own kids.
I'm gonna write a monthly list of Greg's things not to do with a kid and give it to you every month, so you can just sort of compile them into a book of mistakes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, well, let's get on to everyone's favorite segment of the show, and that is Love, Loathe, or Leave, where one of us surprises the other with a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something that we love about living here, loathe about living here, or hate so much that it makes us want to leave forever. And this week, it's my turn.
All right, so let's hear it.
So, Ed, when you go to a 7-Eleven or a 108 or a Family Mart or basically any store where you get change, they always give the change to you back in the same way. They put the big bills on the bottom and the smaller bills on top, and then they put the coins on top of the money, and they always give you the receipt, and they slip the receipt under the coins.
Wow.
Is that convenient for you?
Dude, I know I said this before, but your love, loathe, or leaves are very observational. Like you are, I guess you are a writer.
I'm the Jerry Seinfeld of love, loathe, or leave. What's the deal with the way they give you change?
But now it's funny. Yeah, you've got a whole, you've got a Seinfeldian twist to your love, loathe, or leaves.
Huge compliment.
Yeah, it's like now that you say it, I do notice that, and it's funny. I think that it doesn't bother me, so it's not like some kind of immediate loathe. But I personally hate getting a receipt for everything. I always feel like I'm inundated with receipts, and I guess maybe is that really any different? I feel like for every minor transaction here, like I'm given a receipt, and so my bag or my pocket store is filled with meaningless receipts for like 23 baht.
I always give them. I always give them back to the clerk. Like, don't give me the receipt. You deal with it. It's your garbage. I don't want it.
Right.
And I always think of the late great Mitch Hedberg, the comedian, who said like when he bought a donut, they give him a receipt. I just bought a donut. I don't need a receipt for a donut. There's no need to bring paper and ink into this transaction. Like what am I going to do? Some skeptical friend didn't believe I bought a donut. I got the receipt right here.
Well, okay. So I'm gonna say I'm pretty indifferent to the stacking thing, but I know exactly what you're talking about. They do seem like have this very orderly way they give change, and that doesn't bother me, but I do loathe the excessive receipt giving. So I guess this is kind of like a half loathe. I'm kind of on the same page. I think I don't know why that's sort of the standard way that shops in Thailand give you change.
Like, there's no standard way that shops in Canada give you change. Everyone's got their own thing.
Right. Agreed. Yeah.
I loathe it for two reasons. One, because I don't need the stupid receipt every time I buy a little bottle of a 9 baht bottle of Nompriao at 7-Eleven or something like that. But I also don't like it because I'm super anal when it comes to my wallet. The big bills have to go on the right and the small bills go on the left. But the way they give you the change, if I put it in my wallet, the big bills would be on the left and the small bills would be on the right. So every time...
So actually you guys are equally anal, just in a different direction.
I guess so.
They're as anal as you are.
But the problem is that every time they give me change, I rearrange it. But to them, it looks like I'm counting it. Like I don't trust them.
I see.
So I feel like I want to say, like, I trust you. I think you gave me the right change. I watched you count it, but I have to change it here. So I just stuff it in my pocket. I don't think about it. I'm very organized that way. But yeah, it seems to me weird that every store in Thailand does it the same way.
Yes, that is odd. Yeah. Agreed. Okay, so as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to Chris Morgan for lending us his support at the show shout-out level. And Greg, what did you find out about Chris?
Oh, well, I did a little bit of research on our buddy Chris here, and it turns out he has some very famous blood. His great-great-great-great-grandfather is famous pirate Captain Henry Morgan, who lived from...
For real?
For real.
That's incredible.
Yeah, who lived from 1635 to 1688. Don't ask me how I got his specific family tree. Just go with it. So, Captain Morgan owned 3 large sugar plantations in Jamaica, which is where Captain Morgan's rum is made. Now, as written in the captain's will, each of his direct descendants will get an unlimited supply of rum, which I call fun juice. Well, I'll tell you, Ed, I checked out the Facebook page of our friend Chris. You know what I saw? Nothing but an upstanding young man doing well and having fun.
Wow, that seems weird.
Yeah, imagine unlimited rum, and you go ahead and be responsible. Now, if that were me, all of my Facebook photos would just be a disaster after disaster. So, Chris, kudos to you, Captain, for keeping the straight and narrow going and not letting all that fun juice take over. If only we were all so responsible.
Agreed. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Before we wrap up, I'd like to give a special thanks to all of our patrons who are listening now. As everyone knows, we don't run ads or have official sponsors for the show, so we really, really, really do appreciate the support we get from our patrons. And if you want to get in touch with us, we are at Bangkok Podcast on Facebook and Twitter, or you can send us a message via the contact form on bangkokpodcast.com, where we're usually pretty good at getting back to you quickly.
Right, and you can also find us online where we post each episode and carry on conversations with our listeners. You can also reach out to me directly on Twitter if you're so inclined, where I am BKK Greg. So thank you for listening, folks, and we will see you next week.
See you.
Yeah. I got to start learning how to make iced tea instead of drinking hot tea at my desk here, because when you turn off the aircon and you turn off the fan, drinking hot tea, it's not good.
Oh, really?
It's sweaty.
Oh, you're sweating.
It makes you sweaty.
Well, that's just a general Greg problem.
You call me fat.
No, I'm calling you sweaty.
Oh, fair enough. All right, here we go.